Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Fireside Chat today. My name is Pascal Messi, and I'm thrilled to be moderating today's Fireside Chat on navigating career pathways in economics, hosted by Kingsgate Advisors Institute, where I've had the privilege to work as a young scholar and as a research assistant. So today's event is more than just a conversation. It's part of Kingsgate's broader mission as a capacity development and training center, where we're committed to developing the next generation of leaders and change makers through structured mentorships, education, and capacity building programs. Whether you're a final year student, a recent graduate, or a master's student, you are a pivotal point in your journey. And it's exciting, but sometimes it's a bit confusing as well, because the world of economics offers so many pathways, and knowing how to navigate them isn't really straightforward. So that's why we're here today to try and demystify the career landscape in economics through insightful and inspiring conversations. So today we're going to explore diverse career paths ranging from academia to public policy to tech to international development, consulting, and so many other possible pathways that you probably didn't know about. And we're going to talk about how to position yourself, what skills you need to build, how to gain meaningful exposure, and also how to shape a career that's not just successful, but a career that also has purpose. So before we go ahead, I'm going to invite the executive director to give a brief welcome speech and opening remark.
Thank you, Pascal. Good afternoon, everyone, and we welcome you to this virtual Fireside Chat on career pathway in economics. My name is Oluwambe Yolani, and I am the Executive Director of Kingsgate Advisors Institute. I am truly delighted to welcome you to this event, and this event promises to be very enriching and to be an engaging conversation. Now, this event is actually one that speaks directly to the need and aspiration of every emerging economist. Question as to what lies ahead, what is the pathway, what are the career options that I have, and much more are some of the things we'll dive into as we go on with the conversation. So I want to thank you for taking out the time to join us today and invest in your own growth and in your own future. At Kingsgate Advisors Institute, we believe that the world's most pressing challenges require bold, innovative, and well-prepared minds. We've made it our mission to develop innovative and actionable solutions to these challenges by improving policy, empowering decision makers, and also unlocking the full economic potential of communities, both locally, globally, and even nationally. But we also know that these ideas does not execute themselves. They need people that are well equipped, capable, and are visionaries. That's why we are deeply committed to developing the next generation of leaders and change makers through our structured mentorship, rigorous education, and strategic capacity development. So today, as part of our strategic role in capacity development and training center, we are deeply investing in nurturing this next generation. These are thinkers, economics, and policy and change makers through this event that we are having. This event is a reflective to our commitment, and we recognize that many of you are standing at different crossroads as to what the future lies in terms of career choice and career path. So this is why we have set up this Fireside Chat today. And that's why this conversation is very timely and very important. We are also honored to have today to join us Dr. Jide and Mr. Luwani Ojutiku, who will bring their valuable perspectives from different corners of economic profession. Together, we explore a range of career options available to you and what it means and what it can take you to get to the future you desire in terms of skill acquisition and even the networking that matters. So I want you to feel relaxed. It's going to be conversational, it's going to be inspiring, and I want you to set your questions aside that would also be specific to your own career need, and set this time to be an eventful period as we learn together. Thank you once again, and thank you for joining us. Over to you, Pascal.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Pelumi. So before we dive into what we have today, I'm going to introduce the amazing panel of economists who have worked different parts and who are here to share real-world insights and lessons with us today. So on the panel today, we have Dr. Olajide Oyade, and Dr. Olajide is a macroeconomic researcher and a lecturer with expertise in macroeconomics, monetary policy, financial economics, international economics, public sector economics, and also development economics. Dr. Oyade is an economist with over 13 years of experience spanning consulting, academia, international organizations, and financial services, both in the UK and in Nigeria. He has contributed to economic policy through drafting, modeling, quantitative analysis, and project implementation. He also holds a PhD in economics from Obafemi Awolowo University and an MBA from Imperial College London. And he currently works with Kingsgate Advisors Institute as a non-residential research fellow. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Olajide. And also today we have Toluwani Ojutiku, who currently works as an economist with the Department for Works and Pensions in the UK. Toluwani holds an MSc in Development Economics and Policy from the University of Manchester, and also holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Babcock University, both end with distinction. She's also a chartered accountant and currently works with Kingsgate Advisors Institute as a research fellow. So thank you both for joining us today, and we're excited to hear what you have to say. Also, before we begin, I'm just gonna urge the audience that if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box, and we'll get back to that at the end of the session. Thank you. So now we can dive into the questions. So the first question for today is for Dr. Jide, and is regarding career pathways. So Dr. Jide, could you please walk us through the major career pathways available to someone with a background in economics? And also, what are some lesser known but rewarding pathways that young economists often overlook?
Thank you for having me, Pascal. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone that has joined us from wherever you are. It's my pleasure to be here with us today. There are several pathways for students who have their background in economics, right? And as a discipline, I can tell you that as an economist, you can work in any area of endeavor, right? You can work across any industry, you can work across any government public setup, as well as privately established institution, right? Be that as it may be, there are several pathways for economists, depending specifically on what you want to use your economics degree to do, right? I would highlight some pathways because of time, but that does not mean that those pathways are just restricted to the options I will be giving you today. There are so many other options, but nevertheless, I would highlight, one of the most important and traditional pathways. But there are so many of them, and after the call, we can also have some conversations as regards several other non-conventional pathways as an economist. First and foremost, I'd like to mention that as an economist, you can work within central banks, right? You can work within central banks or international organizations, particularly those related to, development as well as financing and the likes. So that gives you the opportunity to work with central bank. For instance, if you're in Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria. If you're in the UK, Bank of England. If you're in the US, Federal Reserves and the likes. And again, other pathways for economists they include working in multilateral development banks or international financial institutions. Here I'll mention a few like the IMF, the African Development Bank, the World Bank, the United Nations, and so many of them. So, but the caveat to it is that if you are treading this pathway, I'd like to also mention that there's some requirements. You must at least try to have a master's degree, right? And solid levels of years of experience to be able to walk that pathway. That's one of the options. The second options, I would like you to take you to consulting, where by consulting we meet the big four, the McKinseys of this world. So when we're talking about the big four, we're speaking the PwCs, the KPMGs, the Deloitte, as well as the EY, right? So, and again, other organizations that are very similar to those. And as an economist, you can work as a consultant or a business analyst, right? And what do you do there? What you'll be doing is to try to help solve business problems or engage in consulting engagements that can help solve your client problems, right? So, and what are the useful tools or skills that you need? The truth of the matter is, for anybody going into that career direction, you most likely would have to have a very solid analytical skills and skills that involves around asking the right questions. Because if you don't ask the right questions, you may not be able to have find the right solutions to solving client problems. Because when a client comes to meet you, they expect that you are from whatever brand you're from, maybe McKinsey, for instance, and they expect that you must be able to give them a solution. So those are the second brackets of areas, pathways by which students can go into. So there are several other pathways. I would like to also call your attention to the public sector. It depends on where you are from. I know that as an economist, roles in Nigeria for economists within the public sector are not that much, right? But again, in some other countries, you find out that the discipline economics is what drives many public sector activities. For instance, I know in the UK, for every legislation that is being proposed by the House, right, economists are the ones who draft most of those legislations. They conduct impact assessments, cost-benefit analysis, and the like. And what are they doing that for? They are doing that to understand the implications of some of those proposed legislations. So, be that as it may be, I'd like to say that I know a particular institute in Nigeria, Institute of Legislative Studies. They do something very similar to this, right? For every proposed bill within the Nigerian House, you find out that they are there to be able to we have economists in these areas to be able to, conduct impact assessment and understand the cost-benefit analysis or the implications of many of the proposed bills that we have in the House. So another fourth pathway, which I'd like to stop there, but there are so many of them, is the traditional route, which is academia, right? And let's say research institutes, right? So I'm putting them together because they do very similar. If you're a lecturer in academia and if you're a researcher in a research institute, you most likely will be conducting almost the same kind of research. So this is a traditional pathway, and this is the most popular pathway for many economists, right? But again, as you all know, for you to thrive in today's academia, right, one of the assumptions is you must have a PhD, right? So a PhD gives you that opportunity to be able to work as an economist or a lecturer in academia. Mind you, the PhD also gives you the opportunity to work across any of these other institutions, right? So you can work across any of these other institutions. And I'll just say lastly, just one more bit. Apart from the development organizations I mentioned, as an economist, you can also work in within the financial markets as a financial market economist, right? Within the investment banks, commercial banks, right? You work in roles such as financial analyst, investment analyst, research analyst. All these roles are umbrellas under economics and finance, right? So if you're working in any of these roles, you are also working as an economist. Let me stop there so that we can have the next question.
Okay, thank you for that response, Dr. Jide. It was very insightful. And I do agree with that as well, because I feel like a lot of young economists just look towards like the oversubscribed parts of economics, like banking and finance, academia, but they don't really look towards other pathways that are available to them. So thank you for that answer, Dr. Jide. So the second question we have for today, that will be for Tolu, and it's regarding positioning and early decisions. So quickly, please, could you tell us what should young economists be doing right now to position themselves for the career paths they're interested in? And also, how important is it to specialize early as opposed to exploring broadly?
Thank you very much, Pascal, and thank you for having me here today. Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm honestly glad to be here. So regarding what you should be doing now as a student of economics, in order to position yourself for a career in economics, I would say there are a number of things that you should be doing or you can be doing now that would better position you to start out your career. So I think the first thing I would always encourage anyone or any student of economics to do, which I think is I think sometimes people will flog it, but I think is really important, is looking for like internship opportunities as a student. So you might be in your first, second, third year, or even in your final year of university. I think you should try and seek out internship opportunities as much as possible in different organizations that you think you might want to work in. So as Dr. Jide has said, there are different career paths that you could choose to follow. So you could decide that you want to work in financial services or international development organizations or even in academia. But it's important that you start as early as possible trying to get work experience in those fields and trying to just understand the type of work that goes on in those in those areas. So I would say number one would be seeking out internship opportunities. There are a couple of organizations that I know do like annual internship placements for undergrad students. So I know during my time in uni, a lot of us were trying to get into KPMG, trying to do like KPMG summer internships. I know ARM as well was doing summer internships at that time. But I know there are a couple of other organizations that have those opportunities open. So I would say you should explore those opportunities and try and get that experience and, start developing your CV as early as possible. And I know the job market isn't the best. So I would also say it's always good to try and explore work shadowing or volunteering opportunities. You could, for example, especially if you're interested in academia, there's nothing wrong with you, reaching out to a professor and saying, oh, can I volunteer and support with your research? I don't know, when I was in uni, it wasn't something that even crossed my mind at that time, but having schooled in the UK, I realized that it's something that people actually do. So like if you're interested in academia, you could reach out to your lecturers and try and just gain experience by supporting them with their research as well. So that's another thing, volunteering and work shadowing. And also if you're I don't know if we have postgrads on this call, but like especially if you're interested in international development, there are a lot of internship opportunities open for postgraduate students as well in international organizations like the UN, World Bank. They usually run internship programs like that. And another thing I think you could do to position yourself as an undergrad now would be to utilize societies in your universities. So I remember when I was in uni, one very popular society that I just remember back then was Investment Society Unilag. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but I just remember how prominent that society was as an undergrad and kind of opportunities they exposed themselves to just by way of being a member of that society, because societies like that brought in people from the industry to come and speak to them. They were able to network. They were also able to get exposed to job opportunities by way of like alumni coming to speak to them and opening them up to such opportunities. So I would say if you have such societies available in your universities, please utilize them. So societies specifically for students interested in certain fields exist in some universities. So I would say please utilize the societies. And if it doesn't exist and you're still in uni, I think it's something that you can go ahead and set up for your university. So when I was in uni, and a couple of my mates, because we noticed what was happening in UNILAG, a couple of my mates started to set up Babcock Finance Society, which I think still exists. Still not followed up in a while, but I think if you don't have that in your university, so for example, if you're interested in finance, for example, and you don't have such a society in your university, that's something you can also explore. I think Bowen also has that as well. So setting up societies like that, if you actually went up to set up your society, that's a good experience for you. That's something you can always talk about in your CV. That helps you start building up your CV as well. So I think that's something those are like key things that you could do to position yourself better towards starting a career as an economist. And then in terms of early specialization, how important is it? So by specialization, I'm assuming this means like whether or not to do like an MSc or a PhD in a specific area of economics, let's say immediately after your undergrad. So I think this really depends on a number of factors. So if you're sure of what you already want to do, if you've taken courses in monetary economics, development economics, labor economics, different areas of economics, and you've identified an area that you think that you're sure that you're interested in and you want to practice in, I would say you should go for it immediately after. But then I would also say try and utilize internship opportunities to kind of eliminate other options that you had in mind. So maybe I'll speak on my own experience. So for me, I was considering development economics, but I also didn't mind a career in finance. So I tried before going for my master's. So from like my 300 level, when I took my development economics course, I was like, oh, this is where I want to be. This is the course I want to do. This is the area of economics that I love. I was sold. So I knew that I wanted to do my master's in that field. I wanted to specialize. But then there were also voices, people giving me advice. Why don't you consider finance? I was like, okay, that's not a bad idea. I started looking for opportunities in finance. So I did internships in finance. I worked in an accounting firm for a couple of months. And from those experiences, I knew that it could never be me. This is not for me, So for that, from those like small experiences, like I was able to cross out that box and say, okay, I'm not going to, this is definitely not what I want to do. So maybe it's right that I go and specialize as soon as possible. So I would say it's always good to try and get some experience in something other than, or another alternative career that you're considering or path that you're considering, to eliminate or check if that's something you would rather do before going to specialize in an area of economics. But if you're not sure, so that's if you're sure, right? But like if you're not sure at all and you don't have any idea of what area you would want to specialize in, I would really say that you should explore as many opportunities as possible. Dr. J, I think you probably has more experience than me in this field. You might be able to add some points to this, but I think explore as much as possible. Try and gather experiences in different areas before going to specialize, because once you get through that, once you go through that MSc, PhD route, you get deeper and deeper into something. I don't think it's very easy to there's a lot of time you commit to it that it gets harder to deviate over time. So I think try and, diversify, gather as much experience as possible, and then over time, from the experience you've gathered, you might be able to now identify somewhere that you want to fit in or somewhere that you want to focus on, and then you can then go on to specialize. So that's what I would say regarding that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that answer, Tolu. I agree with you as well in terms of internships and getting volunteering experience early, because in the job market we're in today, like work experience is invaluable. Like that's really what makes you stand out, because almost like everyone has a degree, so it's the work experience that literally makes you stand out. So thank you for that. And yeah, before we move on to the next question, I just want to welcome all the new viewers that have joined on YouTube, and also while you're here on YouTube, please feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Thank you. So we'll be moving on to the next question, and this is for Tolu as well, and it's kind of stemming from the previous question as well. So this is also regarding like exposure and opportunity. So I know you talked about how internships and volunteering and all of this is key in terms of building your skill set early. But like, what advice do you have for like people who don't have connection to like elite institutions where they can have access to these opportunities? And also, how important is mentorship in navigating the profession?
Okay. Thank you for that question. So I think, like you said, it's closely linked to the previous question I answered. But for someone who doesn't have the connections, because I'm also conscious of Nigeria's labor market and how it's very much dependent on connections and things like that. But my advice or my suggestion for this would be probably utilizing volunteering and work shadowing is not the best option, but I think it kind of it helps you to put that foot in the door and kind of opens doors for other paid opportunities. So I would say if you're finding it hard to, get those professional experiences or formal experiences due to lack of connections, maybe I would say explore volunteering. But another thing I would say is take advantage of, this digital age that we're in. For example, I would say, or what I mean by that is, you could utilize LinkedIn to position yourself and give yourself that exposure. I would say you could utilize LinkedIn. There's nothing wrong with you, just exposing yourself and putting yourself out there by like writing takes on certain economic topics and posting them on LinkedIn, or explaining economic concepts in layman terms and just explaining things that are happening in the economy and posting them on LinkedIn, and just creating the name for yourself on LinkedIn as a student. Like I don't see anything wrong with that. It just puts you in the spotlight, opens you up to more opportunities, exposes you to professionals as well. And then you could also, I think another thing that can help is doing like freelance work as well. There are certain platforms that people, especially if you have certain skills as an economist, so you need to teach us how to use certain softwares like Stata or things like that. There's nothing wrong with you freelancing and trying to gather experience and develop your skills through like those freelance platforms. I know like a couple of my friends used to use Fiverr that year. So like those are things that you could do to gather experience as well, independent of, the formal channels or the professional pathway. I would also say that you should try and utilize your NYC as much as possible, because I feel for me, I try not to leave my hand. I believe my faith into. How do I say it? Put my faith in Nigerians government's hands. I did not leave them to post me to anywhere. I went and I looked for an internship by myself, and I had the company, give me a letter to give NYSC. So I would say so for example, if you're interested in a company like McKinsey and like Dr. Judy mentioned, they have a program they run every year specifically for NYSC students. I think it's called YTP. And I know a couple of people that got in that year, and they really opened doors for them. So I would say utilize your NYC year as well. Try and there are a lot of people that try to get NYC students because, well, it's cheaper labor for them. So you also try and explore those opportunities. So that's one thing I'll say, utilizing your NYC year as well. So in terms of international internships, I think that's also something that you can explore. So there are a couple of companies that I know, like Bank of America, for those interested in the finance and investment banking pathway. So Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, they recruit international interns. So even like if you're interested in international development, I think African Export Import Bank, I think, yes, that's the bank. They also recruit interns from member states. So those are opportunities you can explore internationally. You don't really need to limit yourself to Nigeria's climate. So explore internships internationally as well. So that's what I'll say regarding that. And then in terms of mentorship, wow. So I think mentorship is kind of, I think it's better I define it as what I understand it to be. So it's like a process whereby a more senior person guides usually like a junior person in their career development and their learnings or personal development. And for that, I think it's genuinely very important. Like I don't think it can be overestimated or overstated. I really think that people should seek out mentorship opportunities. I personally, I feel like I should have used it, or I should have gotten more mentorship opportunities early on. So I would advise any young person, anybody just starting out, to seek out mentorship, or seek out a mentor, right? So for me, I didn't seek out a mentor until I joined my current organization. And in the space of like a year and a half that I've been there, like I've seen the immense like benefit of having a mentor. So I would say as early as possible, especially as you're just starting out, it's important because it's like you still are not clear on a lot of things. So you'll be getting guidance early on to make the right decisions, or at least make the best decision with the information you have at that point. So I would say it's good to look out for a mentor early on. And how would you go about doing that? Because I know it's not very clear for a lot of people. Like when I was in uni, I didn't even really understand what it meant or how to go about doing that. But I think one starting place would be, for example, to utilize your university networks. Some of your lecturers are very well connected. You could walk up to them and, ask them, or tell them they're interested. You could even be a lecturer, or you could ask them to link you up with someone that could mentor you. There are some organizations or there's some universities that I would think have mentorship programs, but I'm not sure about Nigerian universities, but I know it exists in some universities. But you could also look out for mentors from like programs like this. So usually universities bring guest speakers during events. You could always reach out to those guest speakers and approach them to mentor you. You could also utilize LinkedIn, which I think gives you a very good opportunity to reach out to like a wide range of professionals. So just involves you sending like a very short message. You are impressed with introducing yourself, telling them who you are, and the fact that you're interested in them mentoring you. You're very impressed by their profile, and you would appreciate like a mentorship or a chat with them. So that's a way to go about it. And there are also some like mentorship programs online. So especially for women in economics, at least or women in economics, at least I know that there are some specific online networks that offer mentorship programs for women in economics, because there are not a lot of women in economics. So yeah, you can explore platforms like that as well. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it does answer my question, so thank you. And I agree as well, because I feel it's all about putting yourself out there in the first place, because really and truly you can't, I know these opportunities are already hard to access, but you can't get access to these opportunities if you don't put yourself out there in the first place. So it's all about putting yourself out there to get access to this opportunity. So thank you for that. So I'm going to move on to the next question now. But before I move on, please, if you've got any questions before this or during the whole course of this fireside chat, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of all the questions. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to the fourth question now, and this is for Dr. Jide. So this question now is regarding skills and tools. So please, could you tell us what are the essential technical and soft skills for entry-level economists today? And also, how should students think about building competency in tools like Stata, R, Python, Excel, and other data analysis software? Thank you.
Well, skill building is a very important aspect of today's economist. If you want to be an economist, or variants of disciplines careers in economics, like business analysis, data analysis, research analysis, and the like. So what I would like to say is there are so many tools out there, right? Whatever it is you want to learn, ensure that it aligns clearly with what you want to do in the future. For instance, you are better off if you know you want to stay in academia or work as a researcher, you are better off learning how to use R and MATLAB, right, than maybe some other software tools that are also very useful, right? But if you know you want to work in products, right, or tech firms, maybe you may be better off learning Python, Tableau, SQL, and the likes, right? So one of the first things I would like to say, it's not about the tools, but it's about what exactly do you want to do. There are so many tools out there, right? So, but again, I will just highlight them clearly so that whichever one works for you, you definitely know that you would need to learn some of those tools. So if you are going to be in academia, you can't go wrong learning R, you can't go wrong learning Stata, you cannot go wrong learning SPSS, and even eViews. These are the most widely used software tools when it comes to data analysis within the economics and social sciences discipline. Maybe I had SPSS and NVivo to it, right? So these are the most widely used. But if you want to move into consulting, I'd like to say that first and foremost, your Microsoft Excel skills and your Microsoft PowerPoint skills, those are the basics. They have to be on point, right? Anywhere you want to go to, definitely, these two, they have to be on point, right? And in addition to that, if you want to move into consulting, I would say try and learn a lot about, but you don't need to learn everything. Just pick one and be very good at one. So if you are picking Tableau, for instance, pick Tableau, learn the ins and outs of Tableau, and be very good at it. And how can you know if you're actually good at it? Use it to do a pro bono project, right? Something that you're not going to be earning from it. Something that you just call yourself to do, and perhaps share it on maybe on social media or whatever platforms you have, right? Or use it to write an article, right? You could just take any of these software tools, use it to write an article. When you write an article, publish it on Medium, publish it on LinkedIn, or publish it on, any source out there that you find most convenient publishing in, right? So that's one of the things I'd like to mention. So if you're in consulting, you could look at Tableau, you could look at SQL, you could look at Python. Just pick one and know the ins and outs of one. You are better off picking just one tool in a year, know the ins and outs of how to use them and how to apply them into, different scenarios, be it policy scenarios, industrial scenarios, or economic issues. Just know how to apply it, even if it means showing pictograms or charts and the likes. Just learn how to use it very well, and if you learn how to use it, it's already a plus for you, right? So again, if you are within the financial services sphere, right? Again, I think Power BI is also very important apart from some of these tools I've mentioned. But again, it's not just to say I want to use everything, or I want to learn how to. There are a lot of them. You can't finish them, right? Just learn how to use just one. If it's for data analysis in economic research, you can't go wrong picking any of R, SQL, MATLAB, Stata, and the like. While for data, if you have large queries of data and the like, you can't go wrong if you learn SQL or Python or the likes, or Power BI and the likes, right? So that's what I'll just say in brief. So those skills are quite important. For soft skills, yes, communication skills is very, very important today because before you are judged, right? Or before you are seen out there, right? You have maybe before you are presented before an audience, some people must have read your maybe CV, your cover letter and the like, and they want to know more about you. The moment you speak, right, everybody has a way of judging you, who you are, right, or how far you've gone. So I'll say communication, you don't necessarily have to be too technical. You can win people's hearts by having very good communication skills. I've seen that happen. I've seen that, positively shape the careers and lives of many people that I don't want to mention on this call. Again, presentation skills is very, very important. You must learn how to present. You must learn how to present yourself as well as make presentations out there. It's very important. There's something that I feel it's often much understated, particularly for young graduates, is teamwork or collaboration skills. Many don't understand the essence of. I've seen it happen a few times when you give maybe two graduates, fresh graduates, some work to do, and rather than collaborate to effectively bring, the right outcomes. They are competing against one another, right? And it's not a competition, right? Learn how to collaborate with others. When you collaborate with others, you know one another's strengths and weaknesses as well. You at least you can then use that to solve whatever task that you have with you, right? So I would say in terms of soft skills, yes, you need excellent communication skills, you need teamwork skills, and you need presentation skills, right? Again, leadership skills is very important, but again, the focus on today is pathways for young economists. So let me stop there, and so that we can take other questions.
No, thank you for that answer, Dr. Jide, and I agree as well, because like we said earlier, like entry level roles are very oversubscribed now. So having this like extra technical and soft skills is what really make you stand out to recruiters, because you need to have something that's different from what everyone else has. So these skills is what is going to make you stand out. So thank you for that, Dr. Jide. So the next question for Tolu now is regarding the fun and fulfillment of the job. So could you please tell us what you find most enjoyable about being an economist? And could you also share with us what moment or project made you feel like, yeah, this is exactly why I chose this path?
Thank you for that question. What do I find most enjoyable? Honestly, I think it's just the idea of being an economist. I rate the profession so much. Honestly, I'm very proud to be an economist. I remember telling my friends one time that I just want to have that job title. I know I'm not really I don't even care what the day-to-day is like. I just want to have the title. So I'm a very proud economist. So I genuinely just like the idea of being an economist. But jokes aside, I think on the more serious note, I think it's just being able to provide answers to questions. My day-to-day involves people asking me questions and me being able to provide answers to their questions based on data. So I look at the data, analyze it, answer their questions, or give them recommendations. And for that, I genuinely just find that enjoyable and interesting, that problem-solving aspect of economics, or particularly my own job. So I would say that's what I find most enjoyable, aside the job title and daydreaming about, my life as a development economist in the future. But yeah, I think that's it for me. My proudest moment, I think I'm not there yet, honestly, but I feel I've done a lot of projects that have led or informed a lot of high-level decision making in my organization. I think for me that's made me very proud of the work I've done. Having people listen to the recommendations I've given, I think that's genuinely just what I'm proud of, and based on what I've done so far. But yeah, and I think in economics generally, what I find, or what makes me really proud of the profession, or makes me really happy about the path I've chosen, is just seeing how evidence has fed into a lot of initiatives. So especially in the development space, or the development economic space, seeing a lot of randomized control trials and seeing the results of some of the initiatives that have come out of that, especially in developing countries, and in addressing issues like poverty. It makes me more intrigued about the profession, and yeah, that's it for me on that.
Thank you for that, Pedro. Yeah, I agree also. It's all about liking what you do, really, because if you don't enjoy what it is you do, you can get tasking at times. And if you don't really like what you do, you just ask yourself, why am I doing this? What is even the purpose of doing this? So it's all about enjoying what you do, because that's what gives you the hunger to continue going. And thank you for that answer, Tolu. So just again to the viewers, please, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll get back to that at the end of the questions. So the sixth question now is for Dr. Jide, and it's regarding challenges and life tips. So could you just share with us what is one thing you wish someone had told you when you were just starting out in economics? And also, how did you handle imposter syndrome or moments of self-doubt while working in economics? And lastly, do you have any tips for balancing ambition with well-being?
So there are a lot of questions asked
Yeah, it's
in
like a
one,
three-pronged
right?
question.
So
Yeah.
let's take it one after the other. All right. Okay. So the first question again. Yeah, let's start from the first one again.
Okay, so the first one is, what is one thing that you wish someone had told you when
I
you were
told me
just
earlier.
starting out in economics? Yeah.
Economics is not about always having the right answers, and that is where many people make mistakes, or many so-called experts, or people who showcase themselves. Everybody likes telling what's the ideal situation, right? So in essence, we appreciate more normative economics than positive sometimes, right? So but economics doesn't work that way, right? In theory, sometimes we may have all been told, for instance, that government, the essence of government is to provide welfare in a society, right? And the truth of the matter is it's not in all cases, right? So most of the times we shouldn't go with the bandwagon that okay, because the book says this is the theory or this is how to solve a particular scenario or situation. Automatically that is what you should adapt, right? Because again, every situation or every context has its own unique difference. So, and that is why in understanding issues, we need to understand the context or the deep-rooted reasons why those issues have come out, right? So if we understand that clearly, then we can then apply the principles of economics. And a field often understated when it comes to this is behavioral economics, right? Because this helps us understand, rationality, concepts like utility and the likes, helps us understand why, you know, some events have been triggered and can, help provide a better direction on how you can then resolve some of the issues. So again, in economics, I would say do not just follow the bandwagon. There's always a ceteris paribus assumption, and I think ceteris paribus means other things being equal, right? So if you take all other things constant, right, then this should be, so that is something I would want each and everybody to think about. Whenever you are speaking about a scenario or how to resolve an economic issue, you must remember that you are holding all other factors constant. But those factors that are constant sometimes have a more intervening role in within the context of the particular scenario that is out play, right? Sometimes. So let's take the second question.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Bide. So the second question is, how do you handle imposter syndrome or moments of self-doubt?
Okay, so I think for me, this is the most important question, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of wherever you are in your career or wherever you find yourself in your career, the truth of the matter is there will always be that moment of self-doubt. And again, how you build yourself as an individual is when you create that kind of self-doubt for yourself. And how do you do that? I remember when I was growing, right? We used to be told that our parents, when they finished the university, they started with one company and they retired, spent 40, 30 years in that company and retired, right? I'm not saying that's not a good career track. It's good. But sometimes you are better off having different career tracks. You're better off having different, experiences across different institutions or, across different areas of endeavor. Because regardless of how good you are or how brilliant you understand the job, when you start a new career or when you change roles, there's something new you have to learn. So if by that means you put yourself in self-doubt, then you cannot grow. You get the point. So I have 13 years today. I'm still learning, right? So again, if I speak with people way up there than I am, who have 30, 35 years, they still say the same thing, that they are still learning. Again, so I would say use that self-doubt as a way of pushing yourself, because if you don't have self-doubt, you can't push yourself to the next level. That is the truth. And the self-doubt always starts mostly at the beginning. So just relax. That's the most important thing. You can't know everything in one day. I've had different career I've been on different career tracks, and I can tell you from every of those career tracks, I start afresh. You get the point. So my last role was very different from the one previously before that, and it's quite different from the role I'm currently undertaking. So for every new role, you have to learn new things. Even if you, for instance, you've worked in the Big Four, right, all your life, and you worked in PwC for maybe 10, 15 years, you are going in as a maybe general manager to Deloitte or KPMG. Trust me, regardless of the experience you've packed in, there are still some things you would have to go and learn in Deloitte. And those things are the most important, because the earlier you learn them and you become strong at them, the better. Again, it may not necessarily have to do with the technical skills. It may be related to the organization, how things, the operations, how things are done. What is required of you on the role. So that's what I would try to say, that use it as a way of, strengthening yourself and being a bigger and better person. Let's have the last question.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Jide. So the last question now is, do you have any tips for balancing ambition with well-being?
Yeah, so both can be done simultaneously, right? But like you said, it's all about balance. You can be quite ambitious, and at the same time, you develop. You don't go over. You don't push the limits. Let me put it that way. So yes. So tips. It depends on what you have. Really, it depends on what you are faced with, and it depends. But one of the things I'll definitely say is prioritize what is important to you, and prioritize what would take you to the next level, be it career wise, be it in life. And also in prioritizing, there's something they call the Eisenhower matrix, right? It helps you prioritize what is urgent and what is important, right? Whatever it is. And on the 2x2 matrix, you have what is important and what is urgent. Whatever is important and urgent should be your priority. For instance, if you are a fresh graduate, and what is of urgent importance to you is to have that master's degree, then that should be your priority, right? Because that is your priority, because of course you believe that once you are done with your master's degree, it can serve as a catalyst for you to develop yourself in a career that you choose. So whatever is urgent and important should be your priority. Then the next is important but not urgent. Then afterwards, urgent but not important. Then last one is not urgent and important. And how do you do that? You also have to create time scales around whatever it is you want to do, right? For instance, if you want to have a master's degree, most master's degrees take between 1 year and 2 years, right? Ensure that within that period, if you can get, if you know, for instance, you are interested in working in a global bank, and you want to work in the financial services industry, within that 2 years, you can take the opportunity to, try and see if you can get internship opportunities, learn new skills, or write new exams that can help you become a finance person or an investment specialist. For instance, we're in the world where today it's no more about just having your bachelor's degree and you say, okay, you want to go to the labor market. Now, the life today is more technical skills and soft skills driven. In essence, what qualifications do you have, and what skills do you have, what knowledge do you have? So within that 2 years of doing your master's, you could also take it, if it's going to be a full learning year for you, particularly if you're on a scholarship and all that, you could also, take maybe a professional exam, maybe in line with what you want to do in your career. Because again, one of the things my thought process is that professional exams trumps any master's degree any day, because that helps you to streamline where exactly you want to go to. So if you want to be a finance person, maybe getting a CFA is very good. At the same time, writing the exams alongside doing your maybe your master's degree is a very good combination, because anybody who sees your qualifications would already have known that, okay, this person wants to have a career in finance, and those kind of things allows, it pulls you towards potential employers in that area. So I'll stop there. I for any questions, we can ask some of these questions, and then after we finish the session. Thank you.
No, thank you for that, Dr. Jide. And yeah, I agree with that as well. It's all about finding a balance, really. And it also goes back to the thing we spoke about earlier in terms of soft skills, having the ability to like manage your time and all your commitments, so you're able to balance your ambition and well-being. So thank you for that, Dr. Jide. And so now we're just going to do a quick fire lightning round questions for both of you. So Dr. Jide, you can go first. So please, what's one book that every young economist should read?
It's a very important question, because I'd say there are many books I've read as an economist, and I find many of them very unique, right? But if there's one book I would say, just for fun, I'm not saying maybe a textbook, on macroeconomics or something, just for fun, just for you to understand economics better, right? I'll say this book by Banerjee and Duflo, Poor Economics, is a very, very good book, right? So if you've come across the book, it helps you understand, why poor people remain poor, regardless of government policies or the effects of interventions in making, them or lifting them from poverty. You get it? But so it's a very good book by Banerjee and Duflo. One of the things I like about the book was the book also introduced, methods in science, like random control trials, differences in differences. It helped introduce some concepts that are not well known in economics to help understand better, economic phenomena. So I'll say Poor Economics is one of the books I would like that we read. So then to understand, particularly if you're coming in from from the global south, there's always this misnomer that foreign aid has a very good effect on the developing economies. I would say it's not just about your thoughts, but just read it. Dead It by Dambisa Moyo, right? It's a very good book to understand economic philosophies and economic rationalities. Funny enough, there's this book I'm currently reading. It was sent to me by a friend of mine, an online friend of mine from Cameroon. I'm trying to remember the name of the book right now, but I cannot. But again, I can put it over the chat, right? So there are so many of them. It's a very good book, and if I can, I would put it in the chat. But one more book I would maybe want to mention. This is not just economics, but for everybody. This book by Robert T. Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you're starting out your career today, it can help you understand what kind of decisions you can take financially. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Jide. Tolu, have you got any book recommendations for young economists as well?
Well, I would say nonfiction is my cup of tea. I haven't really read a lot of economist-y books, but aside my textbooks, obviously. But I'd say one book that I actually read while I was in uni that kind of gave me a rough idea of, because at that time I was considering different career paths as an economist as well. So I read this book that kind of gave me a rough idea of the life of an investment banker, because I was considering that option at that time. And I believe the name of the book is Monkey Business. And I think that book actually really it was a good illustration of, or it was a good story on what like the life of an investment banker is, and kind of deals they do. And it kind of just helps you know whether or not this is something you want to do, honestly. At the end of reading that book, or after reading that book, I started doubting whether or not I wanted to do it. But it's an interesting book to read. You might read it and be intrigued and think that's the life that you want. So yeah, Monkey Business by John Rolfe and Peter Traub. Yeah, I think those are the names. So yeah, that's one book I'd advise you to read if at least if you're interested in investment banking. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that, Tolu. The next question now, you can go first, and this one is one skill that every young economist should start learning this month.
I think for me it would be communication. I think it's important for every economist to be able to communicate. First, be able to communicate economics to the layman or non-economist, and be able to present or write reports. So I think developing your communication skills, start as soon as possible. It could be writing, it could be verbal presentations. I would say learning how to communicate economics and also communicate other things to people would be my advice. Start learning that as soon as possible. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Tolu. Sorry, Dr. Jide, do you have any skill to share for young economists to start learning?
Yes. Yeah. Before I go into the skill, I remember the book. The book is called Change, right? It's a new development model for African countries. A friend of mine delivered it to me a few weeks ago. It's a fantastic book. It's all about change in Africa, right? And it was written by Huge Ukuchu, right? Huge Ukuchu. So that's the title of the author. If you need any information about the book, I can definitely share that with you. As regards the skills that you need, one skill, there are so many of them out there, but one I would say you can't go wrong in is because, again, today you find yourself as an economist or a fresh graduate in economics, and you may find yourself in tech tomorrow. I've seen people who have done that switch. You may find yourself in business intelligence. You may find yourself in consulting, strategy, and the likes. So I would say one skill that can help you across any of these areas is, let me say, R. Try and go and learn how to use R. R would help you develop your technical abilities and your technical capabilities better. Be it even if you want to use it for for descriptive kinds of analysis, for exploratory analysis, for any kinds of analysis. And that means that you must learn a bit of coding and writing programs and the like, because you might not know where you find yourself in the future. Yes, what we normally find is people from engineering and the tech disciplines, from STEM in general, moving into financial services and the like. But again, I've seen people transit, particularly when you're an economist, I've seen people transit from economics to even many of these technical disciplines. So I would give you a very good foot into many of these areas of technicalities. Yeah. So let's just say, since you said just one, then I'd like to stop there.
All right. Thank you for that, Dr. Jide. So the last quick fire question is going to be, between academia, industry, and public sector, which one would you pick first?
So who is answering that question first? Am I or Tolu?
Well, you can go first.
All right. I'd like to hear Tolu first. Reason being that she works in the public sector space. I'd like to hear her thoughts on because I work in academia today and she does public policy. So I'm expecting some kinds of bias here. But again, let me hear her thoughts on this question.
I feel like I might surprise Dr. Jide with my answer, but I don't know. So for me, I would say industry first, actually. I'll say industry, and I say that because I feel like it's easier to pivot from industry to both academia and public sector later on if you decide to change, as opposed to, well, you could argue that maybe it's easy to pivot from academia to industry, but from my own standpoint, I feel like if you have industry experience, fine, you can go back to school and do your PhD and then move into academia. And you could also, move from industry to the public sector. Like you'll be bringing, I feel like that wealth of experience from industries is usually very valuable in both academia and the public sector. So that's why that's why I have that position.
All right, thank you so much, Tolu. Yeah. For me, let me first state this, that I've had very good experience across the three. Right, so I've worked in the public sector. I've done almost 5 years of my life in the public sector. I've done almost 5 years of my life in the industry, and I've done some of my years of my life, in academia. But one of the things I would say is, as a discipline, so I'll look at it from different angles.
Okay.
As a discipline, right? As based on what you want for yourself and eventually what your career goals are in the future. So as a discipline, if you want to look at economics as a discipline, then you should be thinking the public sector, right? And the reason why I say this is most roles in economics are clearly aligned towards the public sector. Look at many areas of economics: health economics, development economics, environmental economics, fiscal economics, or public sector economics. The only area that, so quote and unquote, I'm not saying it, we don't have to restrict it to all that, is the only area that, closely aligns with maybe the financial sector are like monetary economics, maybe international economics for international organizations, then financial economics for the financial sector. But the rest of them are more closely, not like you can, I said on the balance, they are more public sector driven than private sector driven. So I don't want you to get me wrong. And that's why many economists, when they are in the private sector, particularly in the financial sector, they go and take maybe an MBA, a master's in finance, a CFA, an FRM, and all those things, right? Just to also complement their bachelor's degree background in economics. So if you're looking at economics as a discipline, I would say it's more situated towards the public sector. I didn't understand this when I was in Nigeria, but I understand it today because I have done that kind of role in the UK, right? Because again, legislation is coming up on maybe public sector utilities or water, maybe it may be on water, maybe it may be on agriculture. Who are the people that are going to analyze these issues? Who are the people that are going to come up with, the stats, the effect of a policy implementation? They are economists or public policy analysts. So economics, and that is what, and that's why in the UK, many economists here are public sector driven. And we have areas like water economics, land economics, urban economics, rail economics, even transport economics, air economics, right? Because again, and most of these sectors are driven by the public sector here in the UK, right? Secondly, if you are thinking, about that, I'll say public policy, public sector, and that's because it helps you understand or answers the question of why. Why is this happening? On the other hand, industry helps you with the how. How do you want to go about solving a problem? Really. So, for instance, if you are an investment analyst and you want to, the trade policies that President Trump recently put a hike on some tariffs and the like globally or across some countries, before the release of some of those policies. I mean, before Trump rescinded the decision temporarily, right? As an investor, you could ask yourself, what is in it for me? What is the implication of that for maybe a developing economy like Nigeria, South Africa, or emerging markets like South Africa, Brazil, and the like? So how? So for investors, how can you guide their investment so that regardless of the Donald Trump policy, it has a positive effect on your investors and your business? So the industry helps you answer that question correctly as the how. And that's why we have a lot of economists, investment analysts, financial analysts, research analysts that, help drive some of these decisions, even portfolio managers. That's what they do, right? But the last one is academia. Academia is, it's quite different. But one of the advantages of academia is, it helps you, how do I explain this? It helps you, it gives you that freedom to do whatever it is you want to do. You are not bound by a company asking you to conduct a research in a particular area. That's one of the restrictiveness of working in the public policy space, in the government space, or in industry. You have to do research that can help your organization or your think tank, provide, better decisions or whatever your objectives are. But in academia, you are not bounded by any of this, right? So you're not bound. Because you are not bounded, you have that freedom to do whatever it is you want to do. So taking those three options as they are, in order of preference, right? I'll speak from, and because again we have viewers globally, right? So from an angle of coming from a developing country, I'll say industry first, to be honest, because the reason I say that is I have experience from Nigeria, and I know that we don't have too many public policy firms in Nigeria for the roles of economists. It's non-existent. The only few we have is maybe the NESG, and a few, very few of them, right? So again, if you are graduating over maybe thousands of economists, where do you want to put this few? So they are better off going into the industry, right? So I'll say industry first. Then, after you've grown in the industry, you've become an expert at what you do, you can then move into policy space, or, as a more senior expert, or maybe academia, if that is what your choosing career is. But if you're in an advanced country like the UK, trust me, I would want to say the public sector at first. Because as an economist, that is where you can apply many of the principles that you've been taught in economics to, you see many of those things come live, right? I've done a few projects here in the UK that, when I look at it, I didn't have that same kind of experience when I was coming in from Nigeria, right? And what the public sector does for you is that after, spending some few years in the public sector, and you're able to answer questions clearly, understand rationality around some phenomena, it can help catalyze you to become a consultant in other areas, maybe within the industry or within the public sector space. The last of them will be academia, and academia simply because, academia, you have to have that passion for academia, right, before you go into academia. So be it looking at it from the angle of coming from a global south country or from a global north country, I'll pick academia last, but again, that should be boiled down to passion. If you don't have passion for academia is not for you, right? Because from the outside, it always looks like academia is all easy. You can do. No, it's when you get in, you understand that. And I'm saying this based on my experience. Academia is one of the is one of the you have to be committed. You always have to be working around the clock. That's the way academia is for many of us. So I'll stop there. I don't know if I've been able to, convince you or confuse you on which of the three parts to take first. So, but again, it depends on you. It depends on what options you want for yourself, and what are the options available to you.
All right, thank you for that, Dr. Jide. Really shed more light on what those three different parts entail, and what it is that you actually need to know about those three different parts. So thank you for that answer. So the last question now is just a conclusion and a concluding thought. So please, could you each of you just share one concluding thought with the audience today? Dr. Jide, you can go first.
Okay, I saw a question on just came up in the chat now as regards students with a tutu. Look, guys, if you have a tutu, it's not a problem at all. I'll quickly like to share the story of a friend of mine, right? Let's just say person who finished with a third class in economics and the like, right? A few years back, I graduated some years ago. So this friend of mine, he couldn't even finish the same set as, the year I finished. He finished, I think, a year or two after. I'm not too sure anymore, right? But as the time he got a job, I was still struggling with my master's degree, right? And he finished with a third class. So this is to say that it depends on, you don't necessarily have to think, because you have a tutu, you have a third class, or you have a pass, there are no pathways for you. I can boldly tell you, from my class, I remember clearly and vividly, we were about 277 students in my class, right? My graduating set was almost 500, right? Because we had a lot of, extra years and the like, right? So we're about 277 in my class alone. I can tell you vividly that today, many of the guys doing very well today from that class are even the guys that finished with tutu, that finished with third class, and some of them finished with a pass. I'm not saying the first class and the likes don't do. Yes, you may need to level up on so many other levels, but one of the things I'd like to say is don't use it as a discouragement. Rather, use it as a way of driving yourself forward. You finish with a tutu, that is one aspect. You've concluded one aspect of your life. Don't forget, when it comes to work, after a year, after you get the job, nobody cares about your degree. It's just about getting in, right? So if you finish with a tutu and you need maybe a professional qualification, and you need, because we're talking about economics here, so there are lots of professional areas you can go into. So if you want to go into investment and you can't afford a CFE, go for a CIS, Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers. Start from there. build from there. There are lots of investment companies in Lagos there that once they see your CIS certificate, they are going to bring you in as maybe a research analyst or something. If you like banking, the CID, Chartered Institute of Bankers, you can take the certification. It's a plus for you at the interview, even when you finish and all these certifications can be completed in a year. How about ICANN, which is the most general of them? You could do ICANN. ICANN does not mean that even if you take ICANN, you cannot go into other areas. Yes, you can still come back to work as a research analyst. But what these kind of certifications give you is they give you that broad base. They helps cover up where your lapses are. Because somebody finishes with the first class, is the best student, he has a lot of lapses. And I can tell you one thing clearly, right? At interviews, it's not the first class that matters. It is the person who has prepared the most for that interview and who is lucky to have been asked questions that he has prepared for that wins. That's how it works. So it's not the first class, it's not the 2-2. So if you finish with a 2-2, don't put yourself in self-doubt. Look, the world is, I have many of my friends doing well with a 2-2, doing fantastically well. Some of them holding businesses today, some of them running trainings today, some of them doing things that I even have to learn from them today. So it's not a limitation. So whoever has that mentality, please take it up. Now to the question, I think that already answers your question. So I've used that to answer the question you've asked me as well. Okay, so over to you, Tolu.
Thank you, Dr. Jide. On the 2-2 points, honestly, I think Dr. Jide has covered that clearly. I am also of the opinion that it's not the end of the world. My advice, like Dr. Jide said, would be take advantage of professional qualifications. As long as you could start with one certification and that gets you through the door, it opens opportunities for other jobs as well. Once you're able to, you get your first job off a qualification that you have, other opportunities will come from there. So yeah, thank you very much for that answer, Dr. Jide. And in terms of closing remarks, I would just like to, encourage everyone on this call. You're already taking this right steps in the right direction. Even just taking time out to attend this call and try to gather more information about opportunities that are available to you as as an economics student. So I'll just say take advantage of as many opportunities as possible. There'll be more events like this in the future or happening around you. Try and attend things like that, and seek out opportunities. Like I said, put yourself out there, utilize LinkedIn, seek out mentorship opportunities, reach out to people, ask questions. Honestly, sometimes people will not answer you. Just keep going, ask questions. Even, there are times I ask people questions on LinkedIn, I don't get responses, but it's not the end of the world. You keep asking, keep trying to learn, and keep putting yourself out there. So yeah, that's it for me.
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Tolu. So we've come to the end of the question and answer bits for the panelists. So now we're just going to take some questions that were sent in from the audience. The first question, which we just answered already, was for students who have low grade 2-2 and below and still want to pursue a career in economics, what are their options to scale up? So yeah, both panelists have already covered this, and basically just said it's not the end of the world. It's all about how you can bounce back from this, take certifications, professional certifications, in order to cover up for the 2-2 degree or whatever, and try and use these certifications to make yourself stand out as well. Okay, so this next question that we're going to take from the audience is, it said Tolu mentioned some mentorship opportunities for women in economics. Could you please list some of them out?
Okay, I think maybe it might be useful for me to drop links to some of them. So off the top of my head, I think there's a Women in Economics initiative. That's the name of the initiative that offers mentorship programs. And I know the Royal Economic Society in the UK also has mentorship opportunities for women. There was one I made a note of. Sorry, let me just check. Okay, Association for Advancement of African Women in Economics. That's another one. But I would get links to all of those organizations, and I would probably just drop it in the chat or try to get it across if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. If there's anyone that's interested in these links, please subscribe to the channel, and we'll attach the links to the description of this video after the video ends. So subscribe to the channel and you can find the links after. So the next question, which is probably the last question, is a PhD necessary for public sector parts? Also, is it possible to carry out independent research to drive policy recommendations without belonging to research institutes or academia? I feel like Dr. Jide might want to take this one, or if Tolu wants to take it, that's fine as well.
I can answer the first one, but the second one probably.
Okay, let me take this. To be honest, it's not, right? But if you have it, it's a plus. You get the point. It's just the same. You want to go into the investment banking industry. You don't necessarily have to have a CFA to go in, but if you have it, it's a plus. Yeah. Right, so it's not right for you to conduct research. All you need to do is Tolu has emphasized, you need to get a mentor or someone that walk that path, can make it very, make the journey very seamless or effortless for you, right? And all you need, even if you want to publish, is if you have done 1 or 2 publications, you have that, that conviction, and you've been able to maybe publish in very good journals. You have that conviction, and you can then go on your own path to further develop yourself in the area. So it's not, to be honest, it's not a requirement. It's not like it is, it is the alpha and omega of it. No, you don't necessarily need to have a PhD. I don't know if that fully answers the question. You don't necessarily need to. So you can come in if you have anything else to add to what I've said.
I think Dr. Jide has answered the question. I think the person asked if it's necessary to get a job in the public sector, if I've understood that correctly. But yeah, yes. Definitely a PhD is not necessary. I don't have a PhD and I work in the public sector. So yeah, there's that.
Okay, that's fine. Tolu and Dr. Jide, thank you for answering the questions from the audience. So now that we're done with questions from the audience, I believe that's everything for today. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to the viewers. Thank you to Dr. Jide and Tolu for joining us today and being part of this conversation. We hope that... Oh, sorry, we just got one last question from the audience before we move on. So this is stemming from the previous question. The question says, is it possible to carry out independent research to drive policy recommendations without belonging to research institutes or academia?
Yes, I think it is possible. I know of a person I've seen his research, like Musa Ubed. Yes, I've seen a lot of his works on LinkedIn, even without attaching any of those works to any research institutes. I have so many of my friends as well who do independent research, right? So you don't necessarily, like I told you, you see, you don't necessarily have to, put yourself in the box to think, okay, if you're not in that box, then you cannot get the benefits from. No, all you need to do is plan ahead and tell yourself, like, look, this is what I want to do. And this is what I want to be known for going forward, right? If you want to stay in academia, right, you want to become a professor, right, then you are better off doing a PhD, right? But if you are not staying clearly in academia, right, you can still be an expert researcher and, still contribute your quota to the world any way you can. And one of the things I can tell you is, if you do all these things voluntarily, like on your own, maybe you publish, or you don't necessarily have to publish, because I see many of Musa Ubed's write-up, and these are not publishable articles on that journals. But again, when people see you, it gives them the opportunity for them to be able to, want to learn at least some of the skills or some of your knowledge and insights based on some of the work you've provided. What matters is whatever it is you are doing, genuinely put it out there, right? And have content and have quality content, right? So genuinely put those out there. But if you have it out there, then people would know you for what you are doing. You don't necessarily, even if you want to publish papers, I know many of the journals tell you that if you don't want to put your affiliation, you can just put unaffiliated there. So you don't necessarily have to have an affiliation. Just start from wherever you are. When I started writing papers, trust me, guys, I wasn't doing it at the time. At the time, when I started writing papers, I finished my doctorate degree roughly 6 years ago. And for like the first 3 or 4 years of finishing my doctorate, I didn't publish a paper. That was because at the time it was not necessary for me. But, a few years back, I think that was 3 years ago, I realized that there was an urgent need for me to pour down many of the things I had in my head. That was just the intent. There were many things I had in my head that, based on my experience in the financial services industry and in consulting, there were many things in my head that I would like to. And the only place I can actually, if it's not a consulting engagement with a client, the only place I could actually, or the only avenue for me to be able to find out answers to some of those questions was to conduct research. And I started doing that. I had done a lot, and because of it, I kept on doing it and doing them and doing them. And lo and behold, academia opportunity opened for me, right? So, and because I already had some papers in academia, it was easy for me to transit from the public sector into academia. So that's the whole point of it. You don't necessarily, I wasn't waiting to get that opportunity, right? I just took, I just told myself that if I write this paper as well, anyway, it could also serve as, something else for what I'll be getting afterwards. I wasn't doing it for the current job. I was for my present job at the time, right? Again, something I think I didn't emphasize clearly earlier, why I picked academia last is that based on personal experience as a student, I realized that if you're in academia, right, many of our lecturers who had industry experience or have had one form of public sector experience were better teachers than some of those who were just full academia. But after they finished the university, they went for their masters and they moved into academia. So many of them were better. So it was more or less like a realization for me. And I felt, even though I now be moving into academia in the future, let me have that experience in the in the industry, so that I can also, when I'm teaching in class or when I'm doing research, I can also pick from my experience and clearly alienate it to whatever conversations I'm having, either in my research or with my students or wherever I'm having those conversations. You clearly see that you are a better person when you can mix all those academia, public sector, and the industry together. Yeah, let me stop there.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jide, for adding some clarity to that question. I think that's the last question from the audience now. So that's the last question from the audience. So thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you to the panelists for sharing some insightful tips and ideas to everyone. Thank you to the audience for taking time out of your day to be here for this fireside chat. We hope we've been able to give some bit of clarity to your career pathways and maybe excite you a bit more on what the future holds. I hope one key takeaway that you're leaving with today is that there is no single right path in economics. It's all about you, all about what interests you and what you're passionate about. And whether you find yourself in academia, policy, tech, finance, or industry, all that matters is staying open to continue learning and to be resilient in the face of setbacks. So like I said earlier, this conversation today was part of Kingsgate broader mission to empower the next generation of leaders and change makers. And today's session was just part of a broader picture. So don't let this be the end of the conversation. Keep connecting with like-minded individuals. Keep asking questions. Look for internship opportunities, mentorship opportunities, and try and put yourself out there. So thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you people in other sessions that we would host. In order to find out about other sessions and other activities hosted by Kingsgate, please follow our social media pages, LinkedIn, Instagram. They're all Kingsgate Advisors Institute. And also check our website, which is kingsgateinstitute.org, in order to stay up to date with any updates or any information about any more programs like this. So thank you for joining us today, and I hope you all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.